Ooh, is it
We're live.
recording?
We're live
Yes.
recording.
I hope the connection holds. Yeah, I've got Wi-Fi running, but I've also got my mobile internet, so if the Wi-Fi cuts out, it should just transition. I just find it really funny, like, how old are we? We're pretty old. And, you know, we were around when the internet was basically kind of going full speed ahead.
Yeah.
And there's been no progression in most places in the world. In fact, it's getting worse.
They're still on that. I remember the days of actually having a modem. I don't know if you remember what a modem. But
I don't even know what it is, but it was in my house.
Yeah. Like literally, you'd you used to load the internet from a CD. So like AOL would like provide you, or like Yahoo. And you'd basically kind of like use like the software on the CD to connect to your router. And the router was like, cause it's like the modem. That's what it wasn't even routers. It was just like a modem. And like, it was, you'd have like the whole, like the kind of like the white noise sounds, like while it was loading. And then for like one picture to load, it would load in stages. Like it would like, like appear. This is like, circa 1997. But yeah, it's come a long way. It's come a long way here in the UK. It's come a long way.
AOL used to be huge, man. They totally fucked that brand. It was literally like one of the biggest things ever. AOL was like right up AOL, MSN, all that kind of stuff. It just disappears. It's unbelievable how things can literally just be eradicated from the history books. It's very appropriate. You know, if you ask people nowadays, have you ever heard of AOL? It's probably 20 years from now, people will be saying, do you remember Facebook? And the youth then will be completely oblivious to how extensive the social network used to be, because it's probably just going to end up becoming some fucking government communistic. One social network fits them all. You will not need to work. You will not need to fucking own anything. You will just have your state mandated social network login ID, your portfolio of your recent behaviours and whether or not you can buy a sandwich from the local Budgeons next week. That's what it's going to be like. 1984. Yeah, there we go.
Ironically, Facebook kind of is already, right? It's
it is absolutely
degrees of the CIA, and that's why I think it is here to stay, because of who's backing it. Just like YouTube's here to stay, Google will forever be the primary search engine, unless Google changed its name or creates another one. But I think there are certain things that are here to stay. Like McDonald's is here to stay. Coca-Cola is here to stay. Like, no matter what, like, there are certain key core brands that will never disappear. And I think Facebook is in that bracket. And it's funny that you mentioned like AOL, now they don't really exist as a company, but like I wonder, because I think, did it start for like America Online? Is that what AOL standard for? America Online?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
That's the case.
But yeah, it's funny, and I wonder like what they are actually doing now. Like, okay, just on a little search. Parent organisation, Warner Media, and they're also linked to Yahoo. So again,
so it's
part of a conglomerate. So they still exist as a subsidiary, and now they're just kind of like, it would appear to be just like a news kind of website. I don't know where Yahoo used to, like Yahoo News. It's like AOL News. You probably get like an AOL email address, probably like an email provider as well.
Got rid of the email provision because I was going to open up an AOL relatively recently just to add to my collection of emails. And Yeah, I think they've got rid of that. I think it's just a case of they slowly break down these former brands to again reset the system. Did it actually stand for America Online? Because if that's the case,
Yes, it does. America Online. Yeah.
that's why they made it defunct. Because for me, that's the only logical reason why you would essentially deconstruct something that's successful. America Online is obviously something they don't want to promote anymore. They don't want to promote national sentiment, any form of community, social cohesion, hegemony. Everything has to be, liquidated under this globalist banner. So anything that is affixed to those notions, aforementioned, is definitely under attack. Um, and again, these things, like you say, with the Google scenario, Google might change its name 20 years down the line. Who knows? I mean, companies do this all the time. Countries do this as well. And even cities within countries do this to the point whereby you can look at a map 20 years from now. I mean, Kazakhstan is an example. They changed the capital city from Astana to Nur-Sultan, and then back again to Astana, and little towns and villages and countries. North Macedonia, former Yugoslavian Republic of Macedonia, formerly Yugoslavia. That's how they rewrite history. That's how they kind of prevent there being a thread of information that people can look back on and retrace their foundations and their history. And they're just constantly messing and meddling with everyone's affairs. And now the youth kind of look at us and actually there was a little meme that flashed up recently on one of my feeds, and it was how crazy is it? You sent it to me actually. You sent it to me on WhatsApp just now. It was the beta. The next generation would be called beta generations. I don't know if that was a joke or if that's actually legit. It wouldn't surprise me if it's legit.
No. It's legit. Just like I think I don't know where we are. What are we? Not Generation X. We are
Millennial.
millennials. We're millennials.
Oh,
correct? Yeah.
no, are we?
Yeah, we are. We are from 1982 onwards. What you're millennials? Yeah.
Words. I hate all those words.
Yeah.
Like you look at the kids of today don't understand what it was like to live in certain environments where they didn't have access to certain things, and that's the genius of everything. And when you can change the history, and again, that's something that's like really commonly known, I guess, for at least anyone with a fucking 70 plus IQ, that history is rewritten. But then people don't think of like what history really is. They think of like kind of historical events as forming history. They think of the Second World War, the First World War, Napoleon, figureheads, these kinds of things. But what they don't realize is it's place names, it's street names, it's bands, it's really the culture that creates who a people are, what an identity is. And that's how they change identities, and that's how they erase former identities, and that's how they create future identities, by changing the little things that go underneath the table that people just don't, that people aren't drawn to. It's all kind of hidden agendas constantly being played out to the point where, appropriately, like recently, going back to the startings, but with respect to Kyrgyzstan, this area of the world, if anyone inputs it on Google, is absolutely phenomenal, because if you zoom into Tajikistan, Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, that border area, you have more enclaves and exclaves than most places in the world, if not more than anywhere else in the world, where when the Soviets supposedly, during the fall of the Soviet Union, redrew all those borders to create these independent states, the borders are so mangled that sometimes you have to drive through another country to get to the rest of your country. Like in Kyrgyzstan, there's a road that goes to Tajikistan to get to the other end of Kyrgyzstan. But anyway, I digress. I looked at a place called Isfana that I was thinking of going to, and this is a couple of years ago. The name of the place has now been changed. Like, in some maps it's still like Google Isfana, but it's actually been changed to a Soviet name, to reflect a deceased mayor or some political figurehead in that town. So it's one of those things where, if someone said that to me, hey, I'm going here, I'd have no idea what they're talking about, even though it's the same place. That's how easy it is to rewrite, the world. You just change the names. And this is really appropriate. I'll hand over to you. What we were talking about earlier with respect to words, language, and the spells that they bring.
Mm-hmm.
emojis being a new language that we're using today, which didn't fucking exist like several years ago, and now it's pretty much every other so-called word is a
Right.
fucking symbol.
And what does that do? It kind of like adds, and I'm making a conscious effort not to use emojis because it kind of adds to the whole intellectual laziness, instant gratification. Yes, it is efficient. I can respond with an emoji instead of typing a word. But you know, you trade, everything like involves like a trade-off or an exchange, doesn't it? And it's like, okay, this thing's gonna be easier for me. It's gonna make my communication more quote unquote efficient. But is it making me more efficient in my, use of language? Like, I mean, does it even matter anymore? Like, like, and once again, it's funny that we're talking about the AI generation, this generation beta that people born from 2025 onwards that have been brought up just around, AI, so like a more of a reliance on things that are automated, just giving commands to things and dependence on technology, which ultimately means less dependence on, human functionality and human endeavor basically. And then another thing with these emojis, which is a post that I received earlier on today on social media, the emojis are linked to like the main set of emojis. Obviously, there's hundreds of emojis. You've got trees, coins, stars, everything else. But the main one, the faces, I saw some on social media are actually linked to symbols, to Masonic symbols, to esoteric symbols. It's not it's not like, you're looking at that's exactly it, but you can see correlations between all of the main faces and these, badges, these coats of arms, anyway, there's something to tell you about coats of arms later on off the record, which is actually quite interesting. I can't believe I forgot to tell you that. Remind me when we're offline. But yeah, so, as we know, words are spelt. And words are spelt because they are spells. And I don't mean in like terms like hocus pocus, magic, which maybe does exist to an extent, i.e. we know that resonance is real. We know that words and our voices have a frequency, and our intentions also have a frequency that are actually tangible. Like the science is called kymatics. You can have like a glass of water, and depending on the intention or the sound waves that are put through that water, the molecules are arranged differently. This is something tangible that you can see underneath the microscopes. It's feasible. And then, when you see things, everything that you see, goes into your schema, goes into your brain bank, and goes into your subconscious as a spinal effect. And as a result, everything that we think to an extent has been implanted, because you generally can only think about what you've seen. Like, to come up with something completely original, to imagine a colour that you've never seen before is pretty much impossible. You're just going to, think of the colours that, exist. Although, people that use things like DMT and ayahuasca, a common experience that people say that they saw a colour that they'd never seen before. So, yeah, that's, I mean, it's something that I can't fathom. So heavy is my brainwashing, maybe, or maybe it's because they're heavily intoxicated under this, like, narcotic, for lack of a better term, or, this substance, but, maybe they're perceiving colours that they have seen before to be something that they've not seen before. Who knows? I'm not taking ayahuasca, but I'd definitely consider it. Although there's a part of me that thinks that could be some kind of a sonic trap as well, because it's somewhat kind of like push, and the fact that Joe Rogan's a big advocate of it makes me kind of like instantly suspicious of it, because he's constantly saying, "Oh yeah, like it's a life changer," and you know, you got Terence McKenna and all of these like prominent people in like the world of psychedelics that promotes it to the point where it's become like, you know, somewhat mainstream. So yeah, anything like that, I suppose you need to be like slightly cautious of. But yeah, I'm on a little bit of a tangent there. But anyway, back to the emojis. Yeah, they can have an effect potentially. It's something to look into, something to be aware of, and things I will consciously try not to be using in the future. I'm just going to use good old English language with punctuation, and I might do like the odd smiley face now and again, but no more laughing faces. It'll be more ha-has from now on from me.
I think you're right though with the. I wouldn't. I looked at some of the symbols in the video that kind of gave an overview of what they might mean and how they align to existing esoteric symbols. But at the very least, I think they are intended to represent those esoteric symbols, whether or not they have a literal spell casting ability. Is like for another form of investigation.
Where you were talking about at the very least, yeah.
Yeah, oh hey, so people, the call cut out because the fucking KGB and CIA and all the narky people are obviously listening in. So for some reason, Skype, having had consistent issues since the dawn of time, is now getting worse, whereby our calls are randomly just ending for no apparent reason. There's no logic, nothing's changed with respect to the setup of the application or the device being used or anything like that. So it may happen again, but we just have to do this in segments. Yeah, so I was saying basically about the
about the emojis, that at the very least, it's like they're not made to have an actual, you know, physical effect, but there's some kind of, you know, mockery maybe, or just something symbolic that they need to show. But,
yeah, I mean, you know, prime example is of course the Gmail. The Gmail logo, which is just one of many that represent the Masonic apron used in Masonic ritual practice. But it's not a question of it even being, you know, somewhat familiar or somewhat aligned or somewhat representational. It's exact. Like the Gmail symbol is the exact design of the apron used by Freemasonic ritualists. And yeah, these are the things that they implant everywhere. But the thing about the language, at the very base of it, it certainly diminishes our ability to interact on a more intellectual level, because language is essentially a gateway for understanding, right? It's a means by which explanation can be passed across between individuals, and it's an expression. And if you limit people's expression, you limit their ability to experience, because experience is something that is aligned to to being able to explain, to be able to wonder, to be able to imagine, to be able to invest in ingenuity. All these things come from the gateway that is language. You know, there's so many things in the world that wouldn't exist unless they were explainable through kind of linguistic form. And this is why instead of people reading books now, we are drawn to 10-minute YouTube or TikTok clips, because one builds the other essentially. If you're not brought up in an environment where you have things like books and you have to, spend your lunch break or your the time after school or work, whatever, instead of being in front of a TV, you would ordinarily back in the day sit down with a cup of tea and read a good fiction or the local newspaper, irrespective of it being propagandistic. At least it's something that is building on your understanding of the world. It's giving you a vocabulary. It's developing your expression. And of course, a perfect example, by the way, that I wanted to bring up earlier when you spoke about this, that has bothered me for being so absurd since probably the very day that I began using computers. So probably back in the modem AOL dial-up days we were referring to earlier, is that words, or any form of words, so that could be Google's own documents, that could be another thing that you find elsewhere, but generally most people use Google Docs or they use Microsoft Word. And when you input a word that is a word, and remember, audience, and anyone that may be listening out there in the ether, that of course the real dictionary for any language, but in this example for the English language, is so fucking extensive. The real one, I think, resides in Oxford University, and there's a movie with Mel Gibson actually on the guy that decided to essentially record each and every word recorded in the British language. And this book is vast, but even the words that aren't in that are used, that are used today, there's still so many extensive things that we perhaps don't often use, but from time to time we need to input in an essay or some kind of, formal spiel for solicitor report or some kind of work report. And Google will come up or Microsoft Word and say, that's not a word. Do you need to add it to dictionary? Would you like to ignore this? All these kinds of things. And if I had less confidence, or people have less confidence or less age or less experience in life, say a young student that's 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, perhaps they've heard of this word before, perhaps they think it looks good, perhaps they've read it in a book. God forbid that that still continues into the ages, but they probably didn't read it in a book. Maybe they heard it on a TikTok video and they input it into their essay, their homework, their school piece, and it says, sorry, this isn't a word, and automatically they're not going to feel confident. They're going to delete it and they're going to replace it with what Microsoft or Google give as an alternative or decide that they should use instead. Again, people's language is being adapted to whatever the state determines is acceptable use. And I'll give you an example of a word that I input actually today because I just submitted a piece. Librarial is a word, and it's not a word that's used that often, librarial, but every day I use these softwares, I get at least 10 or 15 examples of words that they tell me are not in fact words. And my point is, without going on a huge tangent, this is software, these are softwares that are used by every working environment in the entire fucking world that turn over billions of dollars and are a derivative of two of the biggest, if not the two biggest tech corporations on this planet, Google and Microsoft. And you're telling me that they can't simply scan every word from the dictionary and input it into their software? Of course they fucking can. I'll tell you why they can. Because all the words that exist that they're telling you are words had to be done from that. Initially, they had to scan every single word into their software to be able to provide us with spell check and all these additions to the software, so that when you come across something that is a little abnormal but for sure is a word and they tell you it's not, it's because they don't want you to use it. The software doesn't have a gap in its mainframe. It is capable of understanding that that's a word, especially in the age and era of AI, advanced coding and software and all these kinds of technologies that we have, these learning technologies. So the fact that they don't do that is simply a mechanism, again, to further restrict people. If I wanted to speak to someone years and years ago, before the telephone and the mobile, I'd have to write a lengthy letter. People were reading fictions and now it's simply a fucking emoji. And, we're replacing our explanations with these minimalist mechanisms for so-called explanations, which in fact just dissolve our ability to progress as a species. And again, we end up becoming these fucking mundane slaves that are used as fucking, I don't know, sex bots in some Jimmy Savile basement. That's a really long-winded explanation. That wasn't perfectly articulated. But people, it is 2:16 a.m. here, so forgive me.
It's quite funny actually that you use that word librarial, and when you kind of break things down and the etymology of words, and we kind of know that libra, liberty, it kind of has associations with freedom, and things that are aerial have are associated with flying or soaring or, been free. And knowledge is power, right? And they say the truth shall set you free. It's just funny that a word that essentially, has links to self-empowerment, i.e. getting knowledge, librarial, is one of the words. I was just going to ask you to give me an example of one of these words, and the universe just allowed you to bring that example, and it's quite fitting. Librarial, lib, aerial. Libra, Ariel. And obviously the Libra, starts, I think that's the scales, right? Libra. I think the Libra star sign is the scales, and they're also used like the scales of justice. Is something that's used. But yeah, etymology is, and as you started off, history, and history comes from language, words, culture, and yeah, words tell us a lot about our history, and and essentially a lot about ourselves. And how we use words. Sorry, will tell us a lot about ourselves. So anyway, that was my little rant on that. Another thing that's been going on recently, over the Christmas period, there've been like 3 different like airline incidents. Obviously, the big one with 176, or was it 179 people that were killed. And then there were a couple more that had landing gear issues in the space of a few days. Another thing that I find quite interesting is that all of these crashes, like literally all of them, happen in Asia. Like over 90% of them are in Asia. Why do you think that is?
I mean, I wouldn't say personally there's anything particularly conspiratorial surrounding that. I mean, Asia's a vast place. Most people live in Asia. And to be honest, there could be plane crashes elsewhere. It's just what the media chooses to highlight. What I do think, however, is the reason. I often think plane crashes are synonymous with kind of subversive behaviour. The number of political figures that seem to fucking die in plane crashes is pretty insane. Look at actually that plane crashes, airplane travel is one of the safest forms of travel in the world. But without going on a tangent with respect to those individual examples, with respect to commercial flights, I still consider most of these tragedies to be subversive. And I think we see so many around the Christmas period, and it's not just plane crashes. We saw the German market incident where people were killed in the German market, again, by probably terrorists, or what they would proclaim to be terrorists, who are essentially just probably mind-controlled agents working for the state. But again, it happened in the United States, I think, yesterday, was it the day before? Might be New Year's Day, another 10 people actually killed in a Christmas market. And this is just to deter people from travelling. One of the mass flight cancellations, it's always around the festive period. The most important thing for their agenda is to restrict any form of socialisation. Social cohesion is the enemy. And traditional family values are the pinnacle of that enemy narrative, which is why you constantly see the promotion of so-called individualism under the guise of smoking, doing shitloads of drugs, drinking, being debaucherous, being the kind of feminist where you're out there sucking everyone's dick 20 times a day, and that's somehow a representation of your freedoms and your libertarian values. Yeah. And they've been doing it since the 1960s. And actually, you sent a very appropriate video earlier, James, which was a propagandist. Ironically, you said funded by the church in 1936, trying to, again, supposedly warn people against the jeopardy that is marijuana and the intoxication that brings. This commercial clearly was trying to promote the contrary to that, because you see things like that as a youth. And again, they don't care about the elderly. The older generations, for the most part, mature senior people, most of them have been manipulated in their period. But for those that aren't willing to bend, they don't care, because it's all about manipulating the future. And to manipulate the future, manipulate the coming generations. And when the young people see a commercial like that in 1936, which is still a very conservative period, very liberal women dressed scantily for that time, having what looked like a really fun time. Like, literally how they portrayed it. Like, it looked, and it would look for young people that are rebellious naturally at that point in their lives, to be exactly what they want to pursue. And of course, it was only 20, 30 years later that you had, 1950s, 1960s, the rise of essentially ultimate debauchery. So yeah, I can't even remember the tangent I've just gone on. Where did we derive from?
But yeah, from like the film like Reefer Madness, 1936. Have you been smoking a reefer lately, John? Is that the reason? is that the reason why? We're getting tangents. But yeah,
I'm getting on stuff all the time now. It's becoming ridiculous. I know. How do we? What were we saying before that?
Well, we went from air crashes.
Air crashes, yeah. Well, yeah, the idea is again to dissuade people from socialization. And, like I said, that incorporates traditional family unity and this kind of feminist agenda and all this kind of smoking and drinking and the promotion of all these debaucherous acts is just the mechanism by which to dilute society and prevent any form of kind of cohesion from taking place. Societal unity is the object of their enemy. So, plane crashes just act as a form of fear to dissuade people from traveling across the world to meet their parents or their loved ones or whatever. And, again, constantly plant that fear-mongering attitude in the back of people's brains. That's what the media is. That's why it has to be implanted into every aspect of your life. That's why when you switch on your phone, you'll get a push notification about some bullshit in Germany, some Christmas market attack. That's why when you go on your fucking desktop, it flashes up on your bottom bar, on your start menu, the weather, and then some news article about whatever the agenda might be. It's everywhere. I mean, YouTube back in 2005, like most streaming services, was literally just a place to post you getting punched in the face by your bro, or I don't know, throwing a fucking pie in someone's face on a tube. And now it seems that every other flash up on YouTube is a news article. It's mass media. Before the advent of modern technology, going back to the original tech of the printing press and newspapers and pamphlets and all that kind of stuff, same shit. It's all propaganda and it all derives from the same source. And it's not a saucy source either. It's a very, very bland source.
Yeah. It's fucking mayonnaise without the salt. That's what it is.
Which is why Canadians know that, because they're bland as well.
Sorry, is what bland?
Canadians love lots of mayo. They have it in everything, and I consider Canadians to be very, very bland.
Yeah. The Dutch like mayonnaise. The Dutch really like mayonnaise. Like the Dutch don't even do ketchup. It's like mayonnaise and fries is a very Dutch thing. Mayonnaise and chip, really. Yeah. A little rewind back to. Hello, can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Okay, good. Right, back to the AOL guy and who owned it. So there were like 4 founding fathers, for lack of a better term. And one of them, who is now deceased, his name was William F. von Meister, of German noble descent. And, AOL, huge, multi-billion-pound corporation. He was born on a cusp. He was born on February the 21st. And, those who've been listening from episode 1 will know that numerology is, prominent, and that it's something that we keep an eye on. And you would have heard, in our episodes, like numerous people who I've named, prominent people that were born on the 21st. And yeah, of course, every single day in this world, there are millions of people born who aren't involved in, or who aren't necessarily complicit in the cabal that, are born on the 21st, right? Every single day, someone's said in 33 or 66 or, whatever, like these things exist. But the percentage of prominent individuals who are born on these dates is very disproportionate, and that's just something to bear in mind. And he also died on the 18th, which is 666, aged 53 years old. Yes, that was just the little tidbit, and very little information on him as well. There's a bit on his family. He studied in Switzerland and Massachusetts at Middlesex Academy. And went to a finishing school in Switzerland. He never completed his undergraduate education, but he still managed to convince a nearby American university to enroll him in its master's program for business. Nothing to do with his Masonic ties, I'm sure. Yeah.
It's funny though, how the Wikipedia is a Masonic entity anyway, to the point where they have similar badges that members of the Google Maps ranking system also receive, by the way, which are like NATO-esque occultist symbols. So if you're a moderator on Wikipedia, you have a system where, the more you moderate and the higher the standards of your moderation, i.e. towing the party line, you're then granted these insignias, symbols and logos, which are kind of a hybrid between kind of Masonic insignias and then military kind of medallions. It's very, very weird. But I think when I first realized how nonsense all of this kind of stuff was, it was during the expenses scandal concerning British politicians, probably 15 years ago now at least, and how they were so able to delete that off their Wikipedia profiles. This is kind of, again, around the time of when YouTube started, 2005, and really when the internet was kicking off, and things like Wikipedia were at the forefront of that. And it would be the place to go to get your information. And that's really how easy it is to delete everything off the web. So when you see the prominent people, like James spoke about there, and you don't have a full profile on someone that literally might have been the kind of leader of the oil industry in like 20th century Europe, or the biggest arms manufacturer, or one of the most prominent political figureheads in a very large country, you've got to be suspicious automatically. And I come across this all the time, and actually had an example because I'm in obviously Dhaka, Bangladesh now, and the biggest corporation here is called United Corp. And I only know this because I went past the headquarters the other day and I was amazed because Dhaka is a shithole, to be honest. It's the most polluted place I've ever seen in my life, as you probably expect from Bangladesh. But this building is beautiful, and then thereafter, after the headquarters, there's this amazing new campus and mosque, and it's really high end stuff for where we are in the world. And I automatically assumed it was Arab money. So I went on Wikipedia and Googled the company and got their information up. And there's nothing about the founders, where they came from, who they are. The biggest corporation in Bangladesh, United Corp, with a very impressive central headquarters and campus facility. And there's nothing on the people that created this, like where they're from, who they are. There's a little bit of like nonsense that these four guys graduated in like 1975 or whatever and built up this business to become the biggest multi-fucking billion-dollar corporation in the whole country. But there's really nothing there's nothing real. And that's what you start to notice. It's a bit like Theresa May's Theresa May's family. If you Google Theresa May's family, and you go on Ancestry.org and Heritage, you do a bit more advanced investigation, you get to a very Jewish sounding name, and then the lineage just ends. And they know when to cut the cords. They know what is appropriate, what you can throw the public, what you can throw the sheep, or the occasional journalist that thinks they're really bright and kind of intuitive, and they end up writing something. They're only writing with the information that's being granted to them, and this is the problem. People go really deep, or what they consider to be deep, finding things, but you're only finding what you're allowed to find. Yeah, that's the biggest problem, and it gives the illusion that after all that effort, after going through all those subsidiaries and digging, through all this paperwork, that you finally found a gem that's been, looked over and untouched, and it's, something that, wasn't actually planted there and allowed to be had. Everything is given. It's not discovered. It's given. That's the biggest issue we have.
I think the best example of that is like when you have these declassified CIA files from the 60s and like
Ridiculous, isn't it?
actually, yeah, like they buy it. It's like, okay, um, the Secret Service are going to release their secrets because, yeah, we're just going to let you know now. And, none of it's meaningful. Nobody's held accountable. They'll even come out and say, yeah, we lied, to go to Vietnam, etc. It was under false pretenses. And, we'll tell you that 30, 40 years later after it's been done. There were no weapons of mass destruction we'll tell people this, but nothing's essentially going to happen. You're allowed to know. In fact, it's part of their law that they need to tell you what they're doing with predictive programming, or they'll just outright come out and tell you what they're doing. Honestly, I mean, the amount. Go on.
No, I was going to just say literally, yeah. And another funny example of that is you often find that military veterans are the most supportive of the governments. They are the government's cabal babies, and these are the people that saw their friends getting blown to shit in Vietnam, and they themselves are probably injured both physically and psychologically. And then we know as an objective fact that this isn't something that we know. I mean, everybody knows that the United States came out after and said, McNamara, who was the Secretary of State, said we invaded Vietnam because South Korean vessel was sunk. It's always the premise our allies were attacked by the Viet Cong, and that's why we're entering into this conflict to safeguard freedom and capitalism against the communists. And then that was the premise of the war. Loads of people died. It was all a scam, of course. And then, after it, they said, oh yeah, we just totally made all that shit up. It never actually happened. And yet the people that were injured in that, the soldiers that were sent off to fucking die for nothing. And there was conscription for that as well. Just remember, people, how mad that is. You were being conscripted. Your children were being taken away from you, literally. Like your 18-year-old son is being taken away from you to go and be sent into a jungle in Viet fucking Nam in the 1960s to die. Like, insane. And yet, often these people then become the greatest advocates of the state. They're like, America, we're great. Like, we love our military. I did 3 tours of Vietnam. Like, they're proud of it.
Yeah.
Proud to have gone to another country where you were forced to be, to kill people you didn't know, under, the premise that was a total lie, objectively. And you're proud of that. Fucking insane.
I feel, and when you say insane, I literally that I feel like a lot of these people are sociopaths, and they have an opportunity to act on their sociopathic tendencies in a quote unquote controlled, regulated environment. It's like I can, tactically plan the deaths of people. It's not like a computer game. It's like, how many kills, it's like to detach yourself to just from people that are just, essentially defending themselves because, we've flown over, to attack these people. Yeah. And then to kind of like, kill people that are just like defending themselves, like we're attacking them. It's bizarre. It's just such a bizarre state of mind. And I think most human beings do not want to go to war. Most human beings, want to live a comfortable lifestyle. Most human beings are generally loving, although there is, a school of thought that, that maybe we've been softened through socialization, which, maybe we have to in certain ways. But for the most part, we're social creatures, just our inclination. You just look at the way, children behave. Like, humans are pack animals. We like to congregate, we like to party, we like to meet and, like generally people like to be around people, generally speaking. Albeit there are several exceptions. So, I've missed the point now.
I've also missed your point.
Right. sending people to die, Vietnam. Yeah, right, yeah. So essentially, in order to, the fact that we have all of, like we have compassion, like we know what's right and what's wrong kind of intrinsically for the most part. To the point where, like, you're flying overseas, oh, yeah, we're going to kill the Viet Cong. Yeah, like, it's just, and then after, and, you would have been out there, you would have seen the rapes, you would have seen, like, the children getting killed, the women getting killed, the old, and it, it's a tough one because, you try to look at things like holistically. There are child soldiers, there would be female snipers, there would be, old ladies that were maybe like holding, but essentially these are just people defending themselves. And yeah, I just, you need to be an absolute, psychopath to willingly want to go to war to defend yourself from, from a realistic threat. Okay, understandable. I would certainly kill given the right circumstances.
This is
But
actually where it gets really interesting what you said there, because they aren't actually defending themselves. And this is from a different angle, because I honestly don't think people are compassionate. Again, without us going into the big ultimate debate of self-interest versus altruism. I don't believe in altruism, as I've stated many times, and I don't actually believe really in the idea of a universal compassion, a universal moral code, being intrinsic, that is. I mean, you can have a moral code that is applied sizably to the majority of people in the world, but that's just shaped to believe such a code, right? Just like the COVID vaccination, that's a perfect example. Most people, whether they did or didn't, would have got it if it was accessible to all four corners of the world. Instead, that scheme was obviously just channeled in certain parts of the planet. But the idea of going to Vietnam, they're defending themselves because they know that it's wrong, but they know that there'd be a social outcast in their home if they don't jump on the bandwagon. So it's a form of social survival, which really is survival in the current climate that we're in. It's not really a question of being out in the forest and you didn't gather enough lumber to eat the berries that you've foraged and the meat that you had salting in some pit in the forest. All this kind of stuff. It's a different form. People survive now based on the wage slavery that we live under. If you don't get paid, you don't eat. You can't pay, especially in the United States, a country where if you miss a paycheck, you're probably going to become a meth head on the streets. That's what it really seems like it's like. There's so many policies in the US that just completely obliterate you if you don't conform. So really, it comes down to they are surviving. And I think the idea of there being a compassion is just so not true. I think it's all an illusion. People like to pretend that they're giving, and religious or self-proclaimed religious individuals that attend the mosque or the church or the synagogue or whatever, they don't do it because they believe in this stuff for the most part. They don't believe in the scripture. They do it because if they didn't, they lose social face, and therefore they have less opportunities for themselves and their children. They might lose their job. They might not get another job because they didn't attend the mosque when all their neighbours did, or they didn't attend the church and evangelical community. Therefore, they're an outcast. They're a pariah of everything wrong and against Christian value. Everyone's essentially following this idea that we need to be a part of something to be. And if we're individualistic, truly individualistic, not the modern day individualism that means spraying your hair blue because your neighbour sprayed their hair green and all going to a climate change fucking conference where Greta Thunfuck is chatting some bullshit in her autistic manner. I mean, really, individualistic, which is standing up and saying, actually, I don't believe what everyone else believes in this crowd. That's really what takes courage. But no one has courage because we are methodical creatures. We are a calculator. We are the most powerful computer that exists, at least as far as we're aware, in terms of living creatures. And we can calculate the odds of saying no in a yes scenario or saying yes in a no scenario and how that's going to come back round on us. And I'm sure we'd all agree that if you're in a fucking mob and you oppose that mob, your odds aren't good. And that's why everybody aligns to a set faith and a set value set and pretends to be compassionate and pretends they care about climate change and pretends they care about dying Palestinians because they've got a fucking emoji and a flag on their Facebook profile which says so. It's all a lie. It's all bullshit. Everyone's egotistical. Everyone is self-interested. That isn't to say, again, that certain acts can't be positive self-interest. But for the most part, people will change that self-interest from day to day, just so long as they've got bread on their table.
Yeah. I would say that, yeah, a lot of people definitely do virtue signal. A lot of people who, you know, have these like, yeah, Free Palestine and yeah, I hate Tories and all of this sort of stuff. Like, they have very discriminative views themselves against, you know, straight people or like, you know, based on, you know, whatever your political, you know, stance is, or, you know, because you're not, you know, yeah, gay, they'll, you know, outcast you from, you know, their group and whatever, which is actually, you know, they speak about inclusivity when, you know, really they're just like part of this little, like you said, blue-haired club. That being said, like there are certain things that, I mean, you know, everybody's different, and I would agree that if everybody just acted on their individual instinct, things would be different, and we are molded somewhat by, you know, societal norms, programming, what's socially acceptable, for sure. I think there are a lot of things, though, that people just kind of, I mean, okay, to get a knife and, you know, stick it in somebody's back, stick it in somebody's head, just like to start to kill somebody, right? These are things that we naturally aren't inclined to do, even as, you know, like just to kill somebody. It's just, I mean, number one, you know, a knife is a social construct to an extent. You know, you could agree that everything that isn't natural, and then, you know, we could go on a whole, you know, wormhole on, you know, have a whole debate on, you know, what is natural, how, you know, but let's just say anything that's not crafted. So there are things that, anything that's maybe seen as not essential for survival, i.e. human beings could live, sleep on a field and just eating berries from the trees and, you know, and stuff like that. So a knife is a social construct, and a knife can be used based on the intention of the individual. The individual might have an intention to harm, an intention to cook, or, you know, whatever he wants to do with that knife. So the fact that, you know, not everybody that has a knife, you know, doesn't want to stick it in somebody's head, I think a lot of people wouldn't even have the thought at all to stick a knife in somebody's head, because, you know, generally people don't want to harm people. Do people generally make choices in their interest? Absolutely, because people want to survive. People are creatures of survival. But does that mean that there is not altruism? I disagree, but we're not going to start that debate. But I would definitely agree with the fact that, you know, a lot of things that people do, and like the best point that you made was, people don't want to be outcast, and, you know, people, you know, have a fear of, you know, of being honest, because, you know, other thing that you see is that, I think another part of the psychology is that people want to be on the winning side, right? And, you know, like, everybody should know that, oh yeah, like, you know, Palestine, like, you know, kids getting bombed, but like, most people support Israel. Like most people in the world support Israel. Like, this is, and it's just like it's just unbelievable that, people aren't like, you've got this like criminal nation. They're not seen as like this criminal big terrorist nation. But if you were to mention, like, I don't know, maybe like Iraq or something to, the general simpleton on the street, they'll kind of see that as, or Saudi Arabia, they'll just maybe kind of like associate a nation like that with, being like a terrorist nation when, the amount of invasions that they've conducted, pale in comparison to,
The Jews.
they're the Jews and what they've been doing, and in fact, on all of the wars that they've been funding, like all of them, like literally every single one without fail, every
Yes.
single one of note. Yeah.
At least every single one objectively since at least 1815, 100%.
Yeah.
I would make a point there, actually. I would say that the fact that there aren't people that want to put a knife in people's heads is the problem. And this aligns to your second point, which was that everyone wants to be on the winning side. Absolutely. Most people support the bully because they're capable of being equivalent, at least physically, to the bully and consequently opposing. So they'd rather stay with the bully, watch what the bully does, and be a part of that club so as to survive. I think, you have to hate to love. I don't trust anybody that can't say a negative word about something, because that means they're fugazi, they're fake. Someone that isn't willing to stand out and have an opinion and have a personality and say, oh, well, I like this food, but I don't like that. I'd rather go to that place, but I don't want to go here because I don't like it. That's fine. We're all human beings. We're all creatures. We should be different. So anyone that doesn't have a bad word to say is someone that's never had an enemy is a problematic individual. And unfortunately, I find that to be most people today. And, if you can't think of someone that you want to stab, then you are a problemed individual. And, that problem is being a product of this era of kind of conforming and consuming and being materially aligned with the status quo. And it's funny because we spoke about just before we started this episode of what the topic might be, and we discussed before what we might end up talking about, although it generally just ends up covering lots of different subcategories. But Germany came up, and actually coming back around, I think Germany is a perfect example of the status quo's envisaging of this "you shall be happy and own nothing, we shall own nothing and be happy" future. This very super communist era that we've talked about before. We won't explain all the details, but this kind of digital age of social credit systems where you will literally, as they've stated numerous times, you won't own so much. You will rent from the state, essentially a giant welfare state. And, whatever the state supplants as the current narrative to be supported, whether it's climate change or, Israel or, whatever it might be, people will jump on the bandwagon. And it's the youth that we referred to at the start of the podcast, not having that ability to contrast today with the past because of the eradication, the resetting of history, of information that would give them, had they had access to this information, the ability to contextualize the present with the past and consequently the future. And by deleting history, you're preventing people from understanding the instinctual necessities to life, like how important it is to stand up for what you believe in and think about, even if it's just thinking about something that you hate or dislike or someone that you want to stab, maybe someone like Jimmy Savile or some serial fucking, dictatorial leader from the Middle Ages, whoever it might be. That's a natural feat to have as a real living human being. You should have hate and you should have love, because you can't have one without the other. It's that dualism that is necessary for a balanced individual to progress. So, this is the problem that we face. We have a Germany at our hands. When you think of German culture today, you think of this stringent, this strict, formal, officialized society where everything is done by the book. However, because the system we have has been ingeniously made to make people think that the individualism the state wants you to have is true individualism. The example we gave earlier, spraying your hair, essentially aesthetic individualism, but not true emotional individualism, which is the true individualism, being in touch with who you are and what you want, rather than what you perceive society to require, and consequently conforming to that. I support Greta Thunberg. I'm going to a climate rally on Thursday. I'm listening to this music. I'm watching this film. I'm now a vegan. I've got 5 piercings and I have a tattoo of this on my leg like every other person down the street in Berlin. That's the Germany. It's you can be what we allow you to be at certain points. It is the complete decimation of social awareness. And without understanding who you are, you can't have the confidence to outlay that in a social environment. And essentially you become Japanese, which ironically is an advanced version of Germans.
Absolutely.
The Japanese nowadays is just a German that's lost every form of who they are. And they become this kind of nation where birth rates have basically decimated. People can't interact with anyone, let alone the opposite sex. Consequently, there are no children. People just keep themselves in their apartments. There's fucking hanging hills, all that kind of stuff. They've lost who they are. And that is what the status quo demand of the entire world. And again, another slight tangent there. I can't even really remember the directive that we were coming from. I guess it was to do with, we're all kind of, or a sizable portion of us are extremely egotistical and unable to gauge what personality is in a culture where personality is actually deemed an evil.
No, absolutely. Like the fact that malicious communications is actually a crime, so I can't tell somebody that they're a cunt without getting arrested, potentially, is insane. And the fact that the police will actually, the fact that a law like that is even, and once again, we know the reason for it, to nip in the bud any so-called dissidents or those who, go against. It's not for if, Sandra tells me that, I'm a cunt, but if I told, I don't know, Tommy that used to be Sandra, that she's a cunt, then maybe, and I said she, and I did mean she, because Tommy was born a she, I probably would get, arrested under some kind of, I don't know, hate speech, because a cunt is like female genitalia, and this person was born a woman but now doesn't post a man, so I can't call them a cunt anymore, because that's basically sexual harassment.
The UK has built several mega super prisons over the period between just prior to the COVID scam and onwards into these policies of ludicrousy, these malicious what was it called again? Malicious
communications.
Yeah. And we have all these mega prisons being built, which it reminds me, have you seen that movie? I can't remember if you saw it. I think I told you about it. It's the Clive Owen, Michael Caine movie, which is Children of Men.
Oh, right. Yeah. I've seen that before. Yeah.
Really how I see London and the UK as a whole, actually, in the next couple of decades. Really, it's going to be like that. People will be rounded up for sure. And that's why they're constructing these prisons. And it's funny because at the same time you have countries like the Netherlands coming back around full swing again, the country I really quite detest. And more than Germany, maybe. I was thinking about this the other day, but I won't go into that. But they have one of the largest declining prison populations in the world, to the point where they're closing prisons, right? Which is really funny because actually their crime rates
is going up.
Are probably going up. I don't have the data for that.
Because
Why not?
base.
Yeah, it's definitely true. The crime rates for sure are going up because, well, you can say, I know you might not agree with this, but mass immigration, if you take Sweden as a perfect example of the perfect European nation in, say, the 80s and the 90s, it's literally now number one in the Western world. Well, Malmo is for organized violent crime. Has huge high rape count. And actually the Swedish government announced 2 years ago that they were going to start removing nationalities, ethnicities, cultures, and races from the data sets, so that you weren't able to differentiate between whether the attacker, the culprit, was Swedish or non-Swedish. Because apparently that is, discriminatory. But we've discussed in, I think, maybe the last episode of the episode before this, the example of what the Netherlands did with respect to a child rapist who is on and still is on their Olympic volleyball team. And this is why they have a diminishing prison population, because I could probably go out and cut someone's head off in the Netherlands and I would maybe get a couple of years in prison. We've had the example of the Olympic child rapist his victim was British and he has a child now. He was allowed to adopt a child. I like to emphasize this story because I think it's really good. If people haven't heard it, it gives it a real glimpse into the truth behind how certain countries are operated. Their stereotypes are not always accurate. And the idea of Netherlands being this really progressive, fun-loving culture. The Netherlands is one of the biggest tax havens in the world. The Dutch East India Company is the origin of the British East India Company and is a derivative of Antwerp Zionism, which is why all the diamond processing plants are in Antwerp to this day. Blood diamonds that come from the Congo and West Africa and wherever in the world that they can exploit. So this idea of this is artsy-fartsy, nice canal, everyone's smoking weed and chilling place is just not the reality. And for sure, they don't have a crime rate that's diminishing, because no one has a crime rate that's diminishing. Even Japan's crime rate is going up for sure. It must be by default.
Exactly. That's what I would imagine. Absolutely.
Yeah, their currency is plummeted. There's mass unemployment in Japan because of that, and a diminishing population, which means they're importing lots of people from India and countries like that, etc. Not that necessarily aligns to an increase in crime, but just by the logic that we can apply from historical circumstances and our own life experience in places where people lose jobs and where poverty starts to come about. People by default are forced to do things that they might not ordinarily do. Essentially, social etiquette demises if there's less opportunity for survival. That doesn't necessarily mean the crime has to be like murder or rape and stuff, but for sure, crime goes up if people are stretched beyond their means. In Europe as a whole, in the world, technological advancement means there's less jobs required, but the population's still going up. And again, that population is going up. By the way, this is what I was going to share with you without going on a tangent. Fuck me. So a data set came out that was shared with me with respect to, birth rates and who had the lowest birth rates. I think it was 2020, and who's expected to have the lowest birth rates in the next 5 years, right? So it was Japan, South Korea, and Finland was on the list among a number of
Italy? Was Italy on there?
Italy was on there too, yeah. But when you look at the list for European countries in 10 years, none of the European countries are in the top 5 or 6 anymore. Portugal was also on the list along with Italy. And why would that be? Because if it's just Europeans that the data set's wrong, which clearly it's not, by the laws of logic, the birth rates would still keep plummeting, just like with Japan, for national Europeans at least. So the fact that the birth rates are going up so much that these countries that formerly were in, top 5, 6 European countries are now not even in that. Where are the kids coming from? But that's a debate for another day, of course.
Where are the kids coming from? I find it crazy though that Malmo has got like a higher crime rate than London. That is fucking crazy.
Also has a higher crime rate than Lesotho and a lot of countries in Africa that have a really high rate of AIDS and petty crime. And this is Sweden. Countries in Africa have an excuse because there's abject poverty in many places, but for a country like Sweden to be
yeah, that is wild. And on the crime index, the number is ding 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 63, and London is 64.66 for the crime level. So yeah, the magic numbers.
London, you expect it a bit more. It's a bigger city. You know, it hasn't got that history of being structured. So
like, you know, we're rough and ready. Us English are, yeah.
Sweden, it's ludicrous. It's ridiculous. Do you know, in Malmo, the post office don't even deliver to certain areas now because the postmen just get attacked. So there's entire ghettos where there are no banks, there's no post offices, there's no government services at all, which of course just enhances the problem more. And I would revert to that story. I think it's appropriate for the audience. I was in Malmo in Sweden about 10 years ago, and I couch surfed with an immigration officer. She was Swedish, typical blonde, about 45 years old. Not amazing looking for a Swede, but fine. And in her house where I was staying, or her apartment, she had loads of young men from Somalia, Morocco, those kinds of places. And talk about, what's the word I'm looking for? Not a breach of contract, sort of a breach of contract, but when you shouldn't
be confidentiality,
something like that. But when you shouldn't be doing something, when your role,
conflict of interest, is that
exactly.
What you? Yeah.
And she's fucking all these guys. She was a 45-year-old Swedish immigration officer who was responsible for deciding whether these men could stay or go, whether their visas got, extended or not. She was banging them all. They're all like 20-something years old, Moroccans.
Yeah, that is fucking classic. Just like, the officers that suck the, and smuggling drugs for them and suck them up. It's... we'll definitely get a strike if I was to say what I wanted to say, but, anyway, I won't say it. I won't say the video will definitely get pulled, but people need to be vetted before they're put in certain situations. Let's put it that way.
I think these people are put in the situations in the first place because they are exactly that, as we know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They need to be, but they're not because it serves a purpose. Absolutely. Or they are vetted, i.e., make sure that, in one case, that their IQ's not high enough, that they're submissive enough, put, like the worst people in key positions, like, like the Brian Harvey video, like, did you see the police that came to his front door? Did you get to that bit?
Which one was that? Which video?
On the Brian Harvey video, the E17 video that I sent you earlier.
I only got like 15 minutes in. It's on pause.
Yeah, I mean, when you see the police, it's like not strong human beings. Definitely, those people that are just like, part of the pack, people that have conformed. Like the fact that they're actually following those directives, the fact that 6 adults, plainclothes police officers, I think it was 6 or 7 of them, would go to a man's house because he said something online. Like they should be working like. These aren't just like bobbies on the beat, like it's crazy. 6 of them, like 2 or 3 cars. They've gone to like a guy's house who's not even been for like, it's just insane. And they really seemed to care that they were there. Like it wasn't like, it was like they're actually enforcing this shit with passion. And it's disturbing. And people like that, eradicate.
It's a subclass of people meant in both ways. Because I see them as subhuman, these people that work in the police force and whatnot. But they are a subclass in that they are a class that people can't really, they're another part of society that people don't recognize, they don't see it. Like, they really live between the lines. There's a whole, I know we've discussed this before, in order for this system as a whole, the systematic corruption to be, for it to be applied so successfully in the 4 corners of this world. 4 corners, are there 4 corners? All around the world.
Yeah, I mean, there could be. There's more likely to be corners than fucking curves, I'll tell you that much.
But, we're talking about tens of millions of people enacting these policies. And, it's not, when you think of a police officer, it's not, think of the teams of intel agents, for lack of a better term, people running the computers. I mean, it's not just an algorithm. There are fucking people sat in offices deciding, okay, we need to hit this house today, we need to hit that house, analysing all the data, they're going through the demographic information. Okay, well, this person's white, they're a plumber, they like Arsenal, perfect target. This person's transgender, lesbian, Indian, maybe Hindu or Muslim, that's a bit risky, we won't do that one. They have a target audience because they sponsor a certain narrative at certain points, depending on what the goal is to be in that certain period of time. But right now, in my opinion, universally, because it's happening everywhere, it's not just European countries, it's not countries that are primarily of one race like Caucasian, it's, in Japan, it's the exact same fucking thing. In Korea, it's the exact same fucking thing. National identity is being wiped. Oh my God, huge mosquito. I've got it. Oh, sorry, audience, 2 seconds. I've got it. This bad boy, I've been looking for him all day. He just hit my face and I've grabbed him with my left hand. Right now, I need to just squash this bastard without him escaping because I'm not that fast. Oh, yes. Got him. Right, sorry about that. What I was saying, mate, there's so many mosquitoes here, it's grim. What I was saying is, the idea is to wipe any form of national sentiment off the face of the earth, remembering that nationalism is just an extension of standard societal unity practices, whether you're in a village, a hamlet, a town, in the middle of Siberia, Central Africa, the rainforest in the Amazon. It's a community. That's what it stands for. And a nation state just developed by lots of different communities coming together and essentially agreeing that they had similar agendas and achievements that they wished to pursue, similar goals in essence. And that's what, again, created these empires, these bonds, these countries, as we call them now. So when I talk about them diminishing a national identity, some people might be like, oh, that's great. I'm a liberal. I'm pro-EU. I want to get rid of nationalism, because they've affixed and aligned it, of course, to this image of its drunken, low class, as they would call them, people. And by the way, I did, 15 minutes into the video you shared, James, about East 17 and this Brian Harvey. And I just, the Parliament bringing up his case and the way they emphasised the way he spoke, being obviously a guy from quite a working class background, emphasising like, he said man, and then he said this and man, and even the way the newspapers would, take a quote and have it in bold on the front page, like, ain't nothing like that, like in that kind of, again, demeaning. To be a certain type of person, because they know that generally, let's say, white working class English people are more likely to be nationalistic. They're more likely to have family in the military, more likely to be fans of sports like football, which bring people together. They're more likely to just be more down to earth and social. And that's the enemy right now everywhere in the world. It's people that are not necessarily even a majority in their own country, but somebody that conforms to an identity pattern that they want to eradicate because it's no longer seen as being, of value to their future plans. And that's what globalization is. That's what we've seen from the European Union. That's what the Soviet Union was. These are all empires. You could even argue what people would call colonialism. I hate the word because I don't think it's real, but there's no other word to use for the example I'm about to give. But colonialism, empirism of the 19th and 18th centuries and up into the 20th century is the same as the European Union. It's the same as the Soviet Union. The European Union will adopt very soon Kazakhstan and Georgia. When you think of even things like Eurovision, Israel is already in Eurovision. Australia was in Eurovision. It's literally called Eurovision, the continent of Europe. It's supposed to encapsulate. Australia was in the Eurovision. And of course Israel, which is in the Middle East. It's all a political agenda. And Kazakhstan, as of a few years ago, is officially in Europe now. It even plays in European football leagues. It's fucking insane. And Georgia, as of a few days ago, is currently in protest because people want to join the European Union, and they're going to let the European Union, the European Union is going to let them in as well. And there's no difference between what people call colonialism and the European Union and the Soviet Union, and even the federalization, the federal system in the United States. All of these different state entities coming under one banner, one agenda. It's when you think of all of these organizations, because they take so many different routes to gain the same goal, manipulating everyone to think that there's, again, variety, when in fact it all aligns to the same fucking toilet. You get these like the African League or like the South American Economic Group or the Asian. It's all a mechanism by which to pursue what we currently have in Europe as the European Union. What wasn't so? It's bringing countries, diluting countries under one banner, taking away cultural identity. If you've got all these different cultures identifying uniquely with their own traditional value sets, then you can't merge people into one systematic, agenda, for lack of a better term. And that's the enemy. Culture is the enemy. As much as they talk about giving people equity and freedom of expression, it's fucking bullshit. It's completely against their agenda to pursue that. Everything is about crippling individuality, true individuality. God, I think it's fucking 3:15 a.m. rants here from Bangladesh. I hope the other rooms in the hotel can't hear mine.
Yeah, hopefully there's no Israeli nationals, which there probably won't be in Bangladesh.
I haven't seen a single non-tourist yet. I'm the only tourist I've seen that.
So in regards to like colonialism, I'd say the difference between that is people joining the EU is that, well, I suppose people are joining the EU like they want to because there's benefits to it. Whereas, colonialism was imposed, and it wasn't something. And obviously, all of these countries, all of these countries in Africa are like, they're just kind of like made up. Most of them, like Angola, all of the Congo, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Senegal.
Oh, yeah.
They're literally just lines that were drawn. I think it was when they done it. Was it like the Geneva Convention or whatever? When they kind of got together, so they're saying the official narrative, but essentially, Europeans, went to Africa, the continent of Africa, and certain countries colonized certain places, and reaped their terror, which isn't happening, now people are joining because, there's a benefit they want to be aligned with. Oh, we can use their currency, like everywhere wants to use like the euro. And it's so funny. There's even like a European police phone number. I was talking to one of my German friends the other day. I said, well, what's the emergency number for like Germany? Like, if you want to call the police. And he was like, oh yeah, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure it's like the EU one, and like in the EU, it's like 112 or like 111, and like we all call it. It's just like which goes in with like German conformity, and they were one of the first places to use the euro, were they not? It was them. They got rid of the Deutsche Mark, they got rid of the franc, they got rid of the guilder, they got rid of the peseta, they got rid of the lira, and I think it rolled out in those places all around the same time, I think. But yeah,
European now as well, a European Union army, which was again all part of the plan. Very Starship Troopers.
So but yeah, absolutely. Like they want. There's a globalist agenda, and it's just amazing, like how many non-straight people I see these days. Like I never used to see so many gay people, but like, they're just like everywhere now.
Remember that video you showed, German politician licking the urinal?
Yes. Like, I mean, yeah. I mean, people, humans just have no bounds. Like the debauchery at its highest level.
You seen the Cypriot one?
No, a Cypriot necessarily licking a toilet bowl as well.
Pretty close. Yeah, pretty close. It's he's a YouTube prankster that went to Japan and got arrested because he refused to pay to go on public transport. So he'd take like $300 trains, you know, the fucking crazy trains there in Japan, and then he would not pay, and it would be like, oh yeah, it was a prank, bro, like a proper dirty, grimy YouTube prankster. He's now a politician in government in Cyprus. He won his seat.
What?
Cyprus becomes politician. Yeah. This is the world, you see. They're undermining intelligence, logical demeanor, all the practices that have built successful societies globally and in a historical context. And now we've got idiots that paint their faces blue and have 1,000 tattoos and lick urinals and refuse to pay for trains and get arrested in countries because it's a YouTube prank. And these are the seats in government that are taken by these idiots. Again, it's all part of the plan.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Zelensky, Trump, you know, they take the highest seats.
Guy that can't even walk.
I've got this guy up. This guy is 24 years old.
I know, isn't it insane?
Please put up a picture of him. He looks at least 48. This is what? Google, listeners, Google Phidias Panayotou. Phidias Panayotou. Yeah, like mind blowing. He literally looks 50. He's 24. This is like, what?
He might be 24, yeah.
Oh, this is just unbelievable. This is a lie. This guy is not 24. And I know there are people that could, but this literally looks like impossible. Can you see? Have you got a picture of him up? Can you see him?
Wait, let me Google him. I saw him once, and he did look older. But, Cyprus.
No, what? I mean, he's got flipping grey hair. What the fuck is?
Cabal babies. Phidias. They're all Cabal babies, man. Oh God, yeah, he does.
Jesus, what the hell?
No way, he's 24. That's no way. There's no way.
What?
There's no way that guy's 24. No way. That's ridiculous. Again, part of the jokes.
Maybe this is a coincidence, listeners, but on January the 21st, 2023, he met Elon Musk. Elon Musk met him and hugged him, and in the headquarters, yeah, this is definitely some kind of cabal baby. Oh, and for some reason they mentioned that as of August the 1st, 2024, so he's definitely initiated, he had 2.66 million subscribers on YouTube. Why is that significant? Why did they have to tell us that as of August the 1st, 2024, it's like 5 months after that, he had 2.66? I mean, I'm sure he's probably got 2.67 now, you know, like why hasn't that been updated? Let's just leave it there, Wikipedia. Let's just leave it on 2.66 for a reason.
He's the son of a priest. He's the son of a priest. And I guess even worse, he was apparently in the Navy and he was a demolition specialist, which has got to be an inside joke.
How the fuck has he achieved all of this? Like, did he start working at the age of like 10?
Exactly. And he's a demolition specialist, and now he's demolishing the political scene in Cyprus. It's all just a joke. He built a career on TikTok and YouTube after being a demolition expert in the fucking military. Have you seen the video of him with Elon Musk as well? He's just a character. It's so, like, gay. It's ridiculous. He's like hugging his belly.
Yeah. Which is symbolic as well. The belly of the beast, maybe. There's some kind of...
priest.
Yeah. exactly, getting on your knees, it's definitely part of his initiation ceremony. And apparently he wanted to hug like 99, which is 66 upside down. Wanted to hug 99 celebrities, like strange number. Yeah,
They're
it's
definitely not 24 years old. Absolutely ridiculous.
yeah. It's just like what?
It's insane.
Yeah, a real eye opener. I think yeah, it's been a while. We're like a bus. And one of us doesn't come along for a long time, and then yeah, you get several of us at once. Normally our episodes are under an hour. We're probably pushing 3, maybe.
No,
Uh,
this isn't.
no, hour and 15. But okay, no, okay, I'm just over an hour and a half. Just over an hour and a half. But yeah, I suppose we can wrap this one up. A belated Happy New Year, people. I hope this podcast put a little bit of a smile on people's faces and some new optimism to face 2025 with, on how they're attempting to fuck us over.
Make
But
eating themselves listening to us.
yeah, or we indirectly fuck you over by making you want to kill yourself, either or.
Yeah,
Um,
the spells,
but we
languages.
try and balance things with solutions and a bit of humour. So have a little giggle before you pull the trigger.
That's gonna be YouTube's flag there. We don't encourage
Couldn't be. Yeah.
mass suicide, only justified. But
Only in Georgetown. Only in Georgetown.
oh yeah, we need to do a video at some point back on the Jonestown massacre, because I found something out about that recently that's really interesting. But I guess that can wait. And like James said, thank you everybody for tuning in. And yeah, I hope people have learned something, and they don't find our voices too dreary. It is 3:15 a.m. for me.
Yeah, I haven't got the excuse. It's 9:20 here, but
Prime time. All right.
yeah,
Okay.
apart
Yeah. All right. Well,
again, so a little worse for wear. A week actually. I forgot what days it is because I've been on holidays and stuff. But yeah, back to work today.
back to being enslaved by the system.
To
Yeah.
them to an extent.
Yeah. Till next time, people. Before we start ranting off about James's debauchery or his parties or his New Year's scene. James, you need to tell me about the aristocrat story.
Yes, I will. As soon as we get off, I'll call you and I'll fill you in. You're going to be like, wow. But yeah, okay. Adios, peeps. Until next time.
Yeah, likewise. Bye.
Ciao.